Hi.
Greetings.
We are in the Pure Worship book. We're in a new chapter, chapter 18, My Great Rage Will Flare Up. We're at the first subheading, which is, What Provokes Jehovah's Great Rage?
And Vivian's reading from the book. I am reading from the screen.
So, you're reading the first one. Oh, no, I am.
You are, dear.
We first need to recognize that Jehovah's anger is not like that, of imperfect humans. When man's anger boils over into rage and spills over into action, the results are often uncontrolled and are seldom good. For example, Cain, the first son of Adam, became hot with anger because Jehovah rejected his sacrifice, but approved of the gift offered by Abel. The outcome? Cain murdered his righteous brother. Think, too, of David, described as a man agreeable to Jehovah's heart. Even this good man almost committed a terrible crime when he heard that a rich landowner, Nabal, screamed insults at him and his men. Boiling with rage, David and his soldiers strapped on their swords, intending to kill not only ungrateful Nabal, but also every male in his household. Fortunately, Nabal's wife, Abigail, was able to convince David and his men not to take revenge. With good reason, Jehovah inspired James to write, Man's anger does not bring about God's righteousness.
In contrast with man's temper, which is often misdirected, Jehovah's disposition is always controlled and predictable. Even when motivated by great rage, Jehovah acts righteously. When he fights an enemy, he never sweeps away the righteous with the wicked, according to, they cite Genesis 18:22-25. In addition, Jehovah's anger is ignited only for righteous reasons. Consider two reasons and the lessons we can learn from them. Here's the reason they give. Jehovah's name is profaned. Those who claim to represent Jehovah but who act wickedly damage his reputation and rightly provoke his anger. And then they cite Ezekiel, for the only time in these three paragraphs, Ezekiel 36:23. As discussed in the preceding chapters of this publication, the nation of Israel brought great reproach on Jehovah's name. Understandably, the nation's attitudes and actions made Jehovah angry. But he never lost control of his rage. He punished his people only to the proper degree, never beyond it. There they cite Jeremiah 30, verse 11, that we read last time. And once Jehovah's anger accomplished its purpose, it ended with no residual resentment. And here they cite Psalm 103, just one verse, verse 9. So I guess I want to jump in with, I don't know why they picked David as an example here of someone who apparently
almost committed a crime.
So you're talking about his winning out over his bad temper because he's, well, remember the story, he's corrected by the wife of Nabal, the man who angered him, Abigail, who then becomes his wife.
That is true, but you're neglecting to look at the fact that after that, when he becomes a king, he ends up being responsible for adultery and the murder of the husband.
Of the adulterous woman.
Yeah.
And the loss of the child born of that union.
Yeah.
And if you read the rest of David's story, you realize this plays out in his life in a very terrible way.
Yeah.
Even in the revolt of one of his sons against him, and the death of that son, and the death of another son, and finally a civil war. So things go wrong for David after this. And how do you factor that in with your Ezekiel narrative? The Ezekiel narrative is God saves, according to you anyway, the Ezekiel narrative is God saves the righteous and he judges the wicked. But how do you get that out of the life of David?
Yeah.
Because David is, you admit here, a man after Jehovah's own heart, the New Testament says.
So I think it's a mistake to not look at the whole man and realize, yes, Acts does say that he's a man agreeable to Jehovah's heart. throughout his life, he was loved by God. That's even during his worst periods, God shows him love. So he does lose things. He loses the respect of a lot of people. He causes grief in his family life from that point on. But he still has a relationship with God.
He even loses the thing that was apparently closest to his heart, besides his own family. It was the desire to build the temple.
Yeah.
And what did God, according to Chronicles, say to him through Nathan?
That he couldn't, because he had blood on his hands, and it wasn't just Uriah's blood. It was the fact that he was a man of war.
So he has blood on his hands, and according to you, that would disqualify him as one of God's servants.
Yeah.
And this idea, later on, this idea that, what's this quote from Genesis 18, partial quote, he never sweeps away the righteous with the wicked, and you cite Abraham's conversation with the Lord in Genesis 18 about Sodom.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that, even within the Old Testament context? How many examples can we find where God did sweep away the righteous with the wicked?
Well, even the wars that Israel fought in, a lot of times their own people die. There's deaths on both sides. So he doesn't protect them in the sense of, okay, all the good guys, they stand, and only the bad guys fall.
Just think of Jonathan, who was, after all, David's best friend and loyalist friend.
Yeah, he dies in battle.
Who turned against his own father to help David, and then he dies in the same battle as his father does.
Yeah, and then the story in the wilderness, when they're first told to go up and take the city
Jericho.
of Ai.
Of Ai, yeah, Ai.
Yeah, and then Achan takes stuff that is supposed to be devoted to God. He takes some of it and hides it. And as a result, they go on their next battle and several men die. I don't know, 30-something men die. And they're like, what happened? So weren't those men innocent? Achan doesn't die in that battle.
He dies later.
He dies later, but he's found out, and he's responsible for some dying.
So your narrative of Jehovah is doing the right thing all the time, and therefore the faithful ones are recognized by the fact they're the survivors. This is not suiting Ezekiel's narrative either. After all, Ezekiel is in exile. He's a righteous man. He's in exile with the non-righteous.
Yeah.
So they're trying to force everything. All the little pieces of biblical data are forced into this very you get what you deserve justice narrative.
It's an unreal world, because sin begets more sin, and innocent always die or get hurt by other people's sins. So we all interconnect in that sense.
That's right. We're a community, and we will suffer with each other, and sometimes instead of each other.
Yeah. So I think the problem is, when we were witnesses, our major concern was making it through Armageddon. Survival. Living in our physical bodies was the important thing.
Going on.
And having it go on forever, we thought, afterwards.
But of course...
But where's the relationship in that?
No, there isn't one. You're never going to have that relationship. Everything is about your survival, and hopefully the survival of your loved ones.
And your pleasure in this new system.
But in this last paragraph, that is paragraph 6, the last one we read, you've got 3 references. None of the scriptures are quoted. The reference to Ezekiel 36:23 is accurate so far as it goes. Namely, you're talking about the fact that Israel damaged Jehovah's reputation and name by its ongoing disobedience. Fine. But what you don't tell everybody here, and we've mentioned this before, is that whole chapter is devoted to the ultimate redemption of Israel, who he says profaned his name among the nations, but in the future they're going to be used by him to vindicate his own name. Not that they are going to vindicate it.
But his relationship with them is what's going to impress people.
The permanence of his relationship with them. And the same with Jeremiah. Let me just reread that. We read it last time. This is verse 11 they cite here. And what's the point they're making? He punished his people only to the proper degree, never beyond it. Well, certainly the verse says that, but it says more than that. It says in Jeremiah 30, verse 11, I am with you, Israel, that is, Judah and Israel, to save you, declares Yahweh. I will make a full end of the nations among whom I scattered you, but of you I will not make a full end. I will discipline you in just measure. That's the part they like.
Mm-hmm.
I will discipline you in just measure, and I will by no means leave you unpunished. But notice, he's going to save them and not the nations.
Mm.
That's divine election. And of course you don't want that. And then Psalm 103 here, not quoted at all. So you asked me to look it up.
Yeah.
And then when we look up the verse, and what do they want you to see here?
So that
what
verse
do they not
9
mention?
was the one that they tell you to read. He will not always find fault, nor will he stay resentful forever. But read, it's a wonderful psalm, a very reassuring psalm.
One of the best.
And this is being sung by the Israelites.
Generation after generation
Still
to this
being
day.
sung, and the church sings it. Okay, so I'm using the New World Translation, so it has, Jehovah is merciful and compassionate. I'm starting at verse 8. Slow to anger and abundant in loyal love. He will not always find fault, nor will he stay resentful forever. He has not dealt with us according to our sins, nor has he repaid us what our errors deserve. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so great is his loyal love toward those who fear him. As far off as the sunrise is from the sunset, so far off from us he has put our transgressions.
Beautiful.
Yeah. As the Father shows mercy to his sons, Jehovah has shown mercy to those who fear him. For he well knows how we are formed, remembering that we are dust. So this is lovely. He's not watching your every move, looking for a sin that he can get you for, which is kind of the impression you get from this.
So just
he knows we're sinners. He knows our weakness. He's provided for it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Just as he did not cast off David for his multiple sins, the shedding of blood, adultery, among others.
Mm-hmm.
Just as he didn't cast off David forever, but maintained a relationship with him. But he was punished justly in his own lifetime for many of these sins.
Yeah.
But just as Israel has been punished now for 2,600 years, since the line of David in Jerusalem was cut off, what we call the Gentile times, yet the assurance there in Psalm 103 is that he will not cast off forever.
Yeah.
One day our sins will be cast into the sea, Hosea puts it in his last chapter, as I recall. So, yeah, this is a God much bigger than the one we heard about when we were Jehovah's Witnesses.
Certainly more fatherly.
Yeah.
You know, so that's one of the things it said, right? He's a father, shows mercy to his sons.
And this meant a lot to you. I remember when we left the Watchtower that it was a passage in the very next chapter of Jeremiah after the one they cite, Jeremiah 31. Just after that, in 31 verses 1 to 3, you found something that reassured you that when God says, I love you, he means I love you.
Yeah, it's forever. It's everlasting.
So that's the theme of the video we're going to attach, eh? It's
that's right, yeah.
Jehovah's everlasting love. And he does think of himself as the husband of Israel, and he's not willing to cast off forever.
Yeah.
See you next time.
Okay.